Hello, everyone. Welcome to the A Train to Sedona broadcast. The A Train to Sedona is also the name of a memoir I wrote. I share my failings, my successes, and I wrote the book to have my voice be heard, but also, importantly, my hope that my journey would inspire yours. You can purchase a signed copy at my website on lindamarsaneco.com. You can also, it's actually on Buy the Book page. You can also buy the book on Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and bookstores. Now, I also have a free gift for you. I call it the cheat sheet for high vibration living. 7 exercises designed to have your energy be present and highly charged. 7 exercises, and the one that I'm highlighting today is affirmation mantra. And I use mantra when thoughts will not clear my head. And I love the phrase, I am. I would say, I am calm, I am loved, I am Linda. Our name carries a very high charge. You can download a free copy on my website at lindamarsaneco.com. There are 2 disclaimers. One, that this broadcast does not establish a professional relationship. And 2, that the opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect Talk Radio New York City. Today, my guest is Jared Rosen. Jared Rosen is the founder of DreamSculpt. As an innovator in digital media publishing, he has published over 50 media-enhanced ebooks for many best-selling authors and filmmakers, and has published over 40 books in print. Jared is the author of 3 books, including the groundbreaking book, The Flip. As a thought leader, he has presented in venues ranging from TED X Malibu to McKinsey and Company, Sydney, Australia. In the year 2000, Jared co-created the Children's Emotional Literacy Project, endorsed by Mayor Richard Riordan and Norman Lear. Jared, welcome to the A Train to Sedona. And you need to unmute yourself. And the mute button is right. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you for having me, and I'm all ready for the train to take off out of the station.
Yes, we're going to be on the, yes, we're going to Sedona. And what that means is to be able to take the serenity of Sedona and bring it into the heart so that it's ours. So Sedona is a beautiful place. I have some questions for you, Jared. In your childhood and adolescence, in your past, what influences bring you to where you are today?
Well, my evolution really started as an artist. When I was in school, I didn't do well in English, actually, the author of many books and such. I didn't do well in math. I didn't do well in a lot of subjects because I daydreamed. And I did exceptionally well in art. So art was the way I communicated in many ways, in many respects. And later on, went to university, went to Boston University, dropped out of that to be in the art world in New York City in the late 70s and early 80s, and eventually becoming a psychotherapist for years, and an art therapist and using art. So art is really, I think that was really the foundation for my self-expression. And especially, earlier on, I didn't talk that much. I wouldn't have fit on a talk radio show. So I think that was my expression, and I think I really understand now that as far as the neurology, I mean, we talk about people on the spectrum and ADHD and all these things, but really talking about is some people really are less linear and more holistic as far as the way they experience reality. So I would say it took a while for me to really accept myself and love myself because I thought I was, had something different going on.
One of my guests has said that neurodivergence is going to be the new norm. So this is very encouraging that we will be thinking and feeling and just seeing the world more complexly. I think this is a very good achievement. Jared,
Absolutely.
could you, pardon?
No, I said absolutely. I mean, I believe, that we are in a tremendous transformation, globally, and I think the way in people respond to reality is very different than there was in the past. I think people just accepted things as they were, and I think people are looking at things now and saying, "Is this really working?" Much more so than in the past.
And we're finding new ways to do things, new ways to experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what would you say the role of spirituality is in your life?
Well, that's a really good question because, when I grew up, I really had no interest in religion, and I mean, it seems silly, its beliefs and the role of spirituality has really transformed my life because how it came to me was I was in the New York City art world and fairly young and, kind of in a world of celebrity and all that, and something didn't feel right about it. It felt I could feel like the narcissism and the separation-based consciousness, and I needed to withdraw from it. So I started doing yoga. I mean, I'm in my 20s, and my place in Soho in New York on the hard floor, doing the plow position, and something ripped through my body. I've never had an experience like that. It was like electricity that surged through me. The next thing I knew, I was actually looking down above and seeing my body lying on the floor. And I'm like, okay, where's this going? And where it went was I just dissolved. And I dissolved in what felt like I couldn't describe it other than back in the old days in between stations, you called it TV snow. It was just like waves and energy. And I understood at that moment, not intellectually, but fully, that space, time, and matter, all of this is a projection from this infinite state. That got me into the true spirituality because I went through all of as many spiritual traditions and saw the interconnectivities and saw that they were really talking about this underlying reality that where everything is connected and we're in a state of wholeness and oneness. So that then brought me on the path, of course, studying. I studied with a Kundalini meditation teacher, and then I went off to Peru to study with shamans, and so I really started devoting my life on this sort of spiritual unfolding of who I truly am.
What a beautiful story, Jared.
Still going on. Story, the never-ending story, right?
Indeed. Now, you say that, and this is so close to my heart, you say that love is the highest standard. How do you define love and how do you measure it?
It's a really, really good question. Well, there's romantic love, which is a lot of fun, and you can love chocolate. To me, I look at there's two energetic dynamics. There's the unification into a state of wholeness and oneness, which you can experience as love. When we love somebody, we want to be close. We want the bodies to be close to their energetic fields to be one. That's romance and love and
Mhm.
sexuality and sensuality and all of that. And also is when you have a dog or a cat or a small child and you feel that sense of unity. Well, what if we can feel that with everyone? So that's really what we're aiming for. The opposite of that is separation. And the way I see it is separation, let's call it consciousness, like a separation consciousness creates suffering. How many songs about being, you know, romance, the breaking up, just using that term, breaking up, right? So from that state of wholeness, there's that sense of separation that is so painful that for some they take their life. They don't want to live in that state anymore, the isolation and alienation and the feeling of being disconnected from life.
So we want to move away from separation consciousness and have unity consciousness, where we understand and act in the knowledge that we're all connected, which truly we are.
Absolutely. Well, that's, what everyone's looking for and everyone wants. And it's you just can't get it through materialism. I know, the richest man in the world doesn't seem very happy. Um, you know,
There's an old story about a businessman who makes his progression from one level to the top level, and he's in his office. He has achieved his long-time goal. He's the head of a company, he has a reputation, and he's depressed because it brings to mind that it's the journey, not the destination, that what we achieve needs to be felt in the heart. And it's a very different way of looking at making progress and moving forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when we recognize that it's an evolutionary journey, and one of the things that came to me early on, which has really guided my life, is this knowingness that we'll call it the soul. And I don't think it's an abstract concept. As a matter of fact, I'm working with an author now. We're publishing a book called The Dream of Matter, and it's very scientific. And it really basically is this physical world is sort of like a dream. And
Mm.
so death is like waking up out of that dream and the limitation that we experience, in space and time. So it's an evolution. And so what for me, embracing the uncertainty and also to understand that basically everything that's happening in one's life is part of their curriculum. It really is like a schoolhouse. We come down here and it's like, why did this happen to me? Why, why? Well, that's how you're going to grow and evolve. I mean, it's the evolution of consciousness. I mean, I've been through things in my life that, were pretty scary and I didn't know how I'd make it through. But then now I look back and I reflect, and I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have those experiences.
They make us stronger. It has been,
Absolutely.
yeah, it has been said that we create through our thoughts and feelings and intentions the energy that then goes out and attracts like energy. So if I'm having issues and I'm not happy, I've attracted that into my life. So it's important to understand that we are the co-creators. We are, as I say to my clients and I say to myself, we're the president, the CEO of our own company. This whole being we're in charge of.
Yeah.
So it's very active. We're active co-creators.
Well, I mean, I mentioned this book that we're developing and publishing, The Dream of Matter. I mean, the author that came to me had a title. He's a neuroscientist, and it was Neuroscience and Decoding the Mathematics of the Soul. And I was like,
Mm.
I was rolling my eyes, and said, let's call it The Dream of Matter. And as I work with them, reinforced everything that I've known from my own personal experiences. And I believe science is really coming to that place of understanding. So I think we're really sort of stuck in some very old beliefs about what is creation and how do we create. And I also feel like it's very important. There's a lot of let's call it like new age types of beliefs and thoughts that don't really represent the wholeness of what's really going on. It's not, it's both and. I mean, and that's the most important thing. So it's like somebody saying you're creating a reality. I mean, that could be used really if somebody, ends up, ill, very ill, and well, you created that. It's a pretty mean thing to say to somebody. Um,
It's
Even though
much more
knowing that that's part
complicated.
of their healing journey. So compassion for being a human being is essential, even when you have this awareness that we're creating our reality.
Yes. And it's said that at the soul level, we do these things. So if somebody is having an illness, they're looking for, it is written and said, for some kind of experience to grow and to move them forward on their soul's journey. Um, Now, we're going to be getting ready to have a commercial break. And when we come back, Jared, you've written a number of books. You mentioned three. I thought you were the author of even more. Every time I've seen you and talked with you over the last couple of years, there are all these wonderful books behind you. And I want to share when we come back with the listeners how we know each other. And I think that's going to be a very interesting entree. So, listeners, come back. I'll give you a little hint that Jared is one of my publishers. The A Train to Sedona was published with Dreamwave Press and Superbrand. Am I getting it right, Jared?
That's one imprint. Basically, most of the books are DreamSculpt Books and Media, and now we're launching a new imprint called DreamSculpt Gold, which is really exciting. And maybe at some point I can share what we're doing with that. But yes, Dreamwave Press was one of the imprints and that was where you published.
Yes. So I say that with joy. We are going to take a commercial break, and we'll be back to talk more about how Jared and I began to know each other.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona broadcast. I'm Linda Marsanico with my guest, Jared Rosen, a publisher. And I wanted to say that it was around 2021, maybe in early spring, that you connected with me on LinkedIn, asking me about publishing, and you were called and are called the Book Whisperer. Now, I want you to know that I had edited my book a number of times, and the thought of re-editing it made me want to throw up. But there you were, inspiring me, encouraging me. At one point, after the first meeting on Zoom, I said, I don't know whether I can do this, Jared. Yes, you can, Linda. And you pull the stories out of me. You said, Linda, you need to engage your readers with stories. And I did that, and I didn't realize how many stories I had in my repertoire. Make it more interesting, pull them in. And I did that. And we worked for a number of months. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but I have a picture of you saying, we're going to call the book The A Train to Sedona. So you were the author of the name of the book, Jared.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I probably have titled maybe 60 or 70 books. Some of them were never published. There are those that just sort of fell off the cliff, and I always do my best to bring them back. Yeah, I mean, the Book Whisperer, that's an interesting one. I did not come up with that. I wouldn't give myself that title. It was actually one of my clients. Actually, it was David McLeod, who you had on your show. It's like probably back in 2018 or so, or 19, when I was working with him, and he put that out there. And I was like, what the heck does that even mean? And I guess my experience is that I believe when I work with somebody that I can see the book that's already inside them. Some people already have an idea. They have, I'll give you an example of how it works with titles for me. So I had a client who came to me who actually pretty much kind of had a title about resilience in the workplace. And so I sat with her in the first session, and I thought about that title. And in my head, I'm going, kind of sounds like the brochure you'd get from the HR department. And so I looked at her and I said, the Slinky effect. And she looked very befuddled. I have no idea what the heck you're talking. I said, the name of the book. She goes, what does that have to do with resilience in the workplace? And I'm like, so actually the title can be more abstract, And the subtitle will actually needs to say what's in that book, what is the experience that they're going to have. So yeah, that's interesting that somebody gave me that title, and I don't have it on my business card, but I now understand, it really is seeing the book that's inside of someone, and especially when it comes to a title, it really is it's the brand. So for instance, with the Slinky effect, coming into an organization and doing that, people have more curiosity. Well, I'm going to go to a training on that, as opposed to something as sort of banal as creating greater resilience in the workplace.
Do you think that you're being an artist and thinking in a non-linear fashion allows you to come up with the title? You just blurted out the A Train to Sedona, and we thought jazz, the A Train and all of that. So what influences give you that gift?
Well, I think that, we talk about left brain and right brain is more holistic, holographic, spatial. It's not as linear type of thing. So I believe that what happens when I'm working with someone is I can feel, and sometimes there is really an intuitive thing that happens many times. I had a client that came to me, it was actually a children's book, and she already had a title for it. She said, I said, what's the title of the book? She said, The Gift. And so once again in my head, I'm going, oh, I bet you there's at least a half a dozen books with that title. So let's go to Amazon. And we looked, and there were 6 books with that title. And what ended up becoming the Dreamtime gift, because it really for children it was around the gift came in the Dreamtime in, and she was able to get the URL. So we're working with people they're building a brand, and because I'm primarily working with nonfiction authors, and the title really needs to be emotionally engaging in a way, and that's really what I work for. And a lot of times it's inherent in the author and the client I'm working with, and it's just like with yourself, it comes out because it's part of what your experience that you want to create for the reader is.
And you read that because you have that gift as the book whisperer. And I have to say that several times because it's been so helpful to me, and I know a number of other authors have benefited from your inspiration, your guidance. It's a lot of work to re-edit, even to create a book and then to re-edit it. And the process is a lonely process. You sit at your computer, and to be able to interact with a creative person like yourself is a great benefit.
Thank you. I do my best. I mean, I really do. Because for you had content, you really pretty much had a sense of what you were doing. There are people that I work with that really don't know what it is. And so when I work with people, the first thing that I do, and mostly everyone really enjoys this process because it takes the pressure off, I have them close their eyes. And it's more of a meditative experience. And I have them stand in front of an audience. Imagine they're in front of an audience and see how many people are in the room. And there are those people that say, well, I think there's 3 or 4 people. And then there are those people that say, it's a stadium with 10,000 people. Then it's like, well, let's divide it between male and female. What's the ratio? And then we go to what's the median age? Well, there's a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old. So let's say 40, and there's 70% females. So now we say, okay, there's a 40-year-old woman. And what's her name? Like, it's a meditative type of experience. And it comes from Julia. Okay, so have Julia come over to you now, because she bought the book, right? She's at the event, and you're going to sign the book for her. But she's asking you a question. And that question is, what inspired you to write the book? And once that client actually really drops into that, they start owning it. It's this feeling like, and probably with yourself, it's like, this is when we talked about like the soul's curriculum. I believe that's the case a lot of times with authors. It's like, that's a necessary aspect to their own spiritual evolution, their own development of self, and that they have a tribe, they have a community. They may have not found it yet, that maybe are going through, like with your book, that are going through a similar process in their life. And so it's a beautiful thing to be able to inspire people. And I thank you for your work, because it's what we're here to do. I love the word inspire because it has spirit in it,
Yes.
spirit into it.
And I love the product, the A Train to Sedona. You had suggested writing reflections at the end of every chapter. And that was so fun because I could just meditate and write creatively about the chapter and about what came to me. My next question has to do with your books. How many books have you personally written?
That's a really good question, and I'm extremely collaborative, so it reflects in the books that I've done. So I never thought about writing anything. When I kind of shifted from the world I was in the art world and came out of here and was in the world of therapy and also developed a personal transformation system and trained people and did retreats and worked with corporate leaders in Australia and those kinds of things. I teamed up with a fellow who was a real inspiration, Ayman Seloff, and Ayman was the co-author, really the force behind a book called Executive EQ, but also he had developed this children's emotional literacy series and movies, and so I started working with him, and we started developing, and I ended up writing a chapter with him, co-authored, in a college textbook on business and emotions, and it was like, okay, I wrote something. And so that just led me on a path. I was very fortunate to have met and befriended Bill Gladstone, who is a phenomenal literary agent. He's passed away about a year and a half ago. Bill was the agent to sell the Four Dummies series. Bill's represented Eckhart Tolle, Neil Donald Walsh, Gene Houston, down the line. And that was through that I ended up, he represented me. And I had several books. The first book that was more traditionally published was around, I had it was a co-authorship with a fellow named Stu Zimmerman, and who was formerly a hedge fund guy and kind of, had his awakening, called Inner Security and Infinite Wealth. And the subtitle was Merging Self-Worth and Net Worth. And that we brought into training programs and such, and that was developed. Uh, and and then I love the collaborative process. So on the next idea I had for a book, I actually discovered a really cool guy named David Rippey, who was a good writer. And I said, let's do this together. It was called The Flip, Turn Your World Around. It was published by Hampton Roads, and that came out in 2005. And I had interviewed, it was like every chapter was a flip, a shift of something. So flipping the coin was people in the financial industry. Flipping the switch was really I think there was quite a bit of what we had in that book was prophetic. I had interviewed Ed Begley Jr., Daryl Hannah. Daryl was driving a biodiesel car, and Ed Begley Jr., who was, a real force in the world of green living, was driving one of the first electric cars that GM had. It was, you couldn't even buy it; you had to lease it, and so on and so forth in those chapters. So I'd interviewed Oscar Arias, the former president of Costa Rica. That was all in that one chapter. So food, we did flipping the burgers. I spoke with Nell Newman, Paul Newman's daughter, who had created the Newman's own, not Newman's own, but her brand in natural foods. So that was the second book, and that actually we was working on doing a film, a documentary. That never happened, and that's when I really got deeply into the book development, and I was like, you know what? I don't really need to write any books. I'm here for other people. But then it was around 2016. Uh, I had this blood disease, and it was so bad that I went, and when I got rushed because I was having some bleeding, to the emergency room, I had a zero platelet count. There were no platelets in that sample of blood. And I really saw my mortality, even though I had had so many experiences in the past, understanding that death is an illusion, whether it was what happened originally in New York City and that out of body, or when I was approved with the shaman and I once again had that experience. I wanted to bring all that together. So I said, you know what? I'm going to write a memoir for myself. And I think in many cases, it really is a very personal experience writing a memoir because it is a catharsis in a way. And so that book was called Drowning in the Light. And I called it Memories of the New Age because, I had been through so many of these, people say wacky experiences, but they were all, part of my unfolding of my own divine truth. So those are the three books. There is a fourth book that is in mothballs because I'm very focused on what we're doing. We're building a technology platform for authors and readers, and raising capital and all those things that take a bit of my life energy. But I did write a book. I did have an experience that most people would find really, really challenging, and it was extremely challenging when I went through it, where I was living with a woman who took her life, and she actually hung herself in our garage. So that was a really, really challenging experience in my life. And then I started having dialogue with her. I have to say the last experience I had with her was walking on the beach where I live in Laguna Beach and talking with her in my head. And so this was all in my head. I finally hit this wall. I said, how do I even know you're real? And I don't know if it was the wind, but it felt like somebody whispered in my ear, how do you know you're real? Well, that was the end of that one. So I say, okay, I got to write this book. So the book is Light Dressed Up in Matter, and it's
Nice.
in mothballs for a year. And not sure when I'll publish it, because at this point, like I'm saying, I'm kind of more focused on what we're doing with the company. So those are the books, and I have more ideas for books, but it's just not what I'm doing right now in my life.
I want to take a break now. When we come back, I want to talk about how you've worked with authors and that compassion plays a role. I'd like to have our listeners hear what you have to say about that. But for now, we're going to have a commercial break. Come back, listeners.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Ready to serve up success with a splash? Hi, I'm Bruce Kramer, a.k.a. the Corporate Cockroach.
I'm the Renaissance woman, Angie Snowball.
And I'm your strategy doctor, Dr. Navtej Desange, inviting you to serving up success with a splash.
Join us as we shake things up with real talk and real strategies centered around awareness, action, and accountability.
And yes, there really is a cocktail involved. Please join us and sip your way to success.
Serving up success with a splash, where wisdom meets happy hours. Cheers!
Cheers.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona broadcast. I'm Linda Marsamico with my guest, Jared Rosen. So, Jared, you've worked in the last 25 years with so many authors. How does love and compassion fit in with that? And you'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay, unmuted. It's a very, very good question. And I would say that it applies to every single aspect of my life and every single relationship that I have, because it's what's true. So when I'm working with I'll give you an example relative to the question you're asking. So I was working with this author. She's an MD, and very, very profound book. And we got fairly far along with it, and we actually had a fun cover made. We produced a video trailer, and She was probably about maybe 3 or 4 months away from publishing. It was still more in the book development, and she completely disappeared. And I'm like, okay, so this woman's a psychiatrist, and what happened to her? And I sent her an email, and I kept wondering, is this something that I did or whatever? I mean, you want to explore those things, and it took about 6 months, maybe even longer, maybe even 8 months, because I came back to, I sent another email, just want to know you're okay and everything. Of course, her response was full of apologies, and nothing to do with me. It's her own personal journey. And she's on the schedule this week, and we're going to move forward with the book. So what her response to me was, and all the very apologetic and her own self-judgment, and from that place of compassion, I said something very simply. It's like, it's so perfect. This is the time. This is a perfect time. So understand that, as I'm working with people, it's like, be gentle with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically what we're doing in book development, things happen in people's life that, and so, one of the things that I'm very, very aware of it, words that I practically never use: should, could, would. And it sounds, very trite to be saying that because, oh, don't say should, could, or would. But once neurologically, in the brain, those words are meaningless because it's not real. I mean, there's a lot of things, if I should have done that or I could have done that, I wouldn't be the person I am now.
There's something
So compassion really is in the moment. It's seeing somebody where they are, regardless of what they did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like every soul is redeemable. Why? Because this is a world of polarity and that we come into, that we incarnate into. And that means that nobody has a free ride. I mean, nothing is, you could have billions of dollars, like we know the richest person on the earth, and you look at this person and does he look happy? He looks like he's struggling so hard and in so much pain. I don't have to name names, but most people know what I'm talking about. So you can't buy a way to happiness. It doesn't work.
It takes a lot of work on the spiritual journey to be joyful and happy. And I was also thinking that when you were talking about the author who disappeared and came back, people do go through things. It is said that we're in a struggle, but when we uplift that struggle, it's an adventure. It's choosing love over fear. Yes, I have this, I have that, I have to concern myself with this and that. Yet, if I uplift into the love vibration, I'm hanging out as close to the fifth dimension as I can get. And the path becomes an adventure. So,
Cool.
But divine right timing happened to me as well. In the middle of publishing my book, after you had been the book whisperer, I bought an apartment and I had to renovate it. So I said to Juliet Clark, who is the founder of Superbrand Publishing, I have to stop. I can't renovate and finish the publishing of the book. Don't worry, she said, just call me when you're ready. And I did about a year and a half later and started it up again. So it's important to understand that.
When you're talking about compassion, we have to have compassion for ourselves.
Yes.
I think it was a Firesign Theater. They had that line, we're all bozos on the bus. I mean, kind of that, it's a primitive evolution that we're in. We don't understand that. Well, we have AI, which obviously that's a whole other conversation, but everything that we've seen in our lifetime, and there's been so much, evolution, let's say with technology. I mean, just look at, this little device you have in your pocket called a phone. It's not a phone. It has everything. If you went back in the past, you'd have a video camera like this. You'd have a camera. You'd have a big radio, a cassette player, or you'd have all of these. It would probably fill up like half a room of all the stuff, the dictionary, and now it's all compacted, and now it's going further and deeper with AI. But that's all on the material plane. And I think what we're waking up to, the fact is the material plane as we know it is a work in progress. And we really do create a reality within that context of the unified field of all of our collective consciousness. So we do make a difference. And getting back to books really do make a difference. And so choosing to be an author as yourself and put it out there, you're adding to that collective field, that collective consciousness, something that I would say is permanent because a book never goes away.
I love books. I have books in my library. I could have walls and walls of books, and I'd love to page through them. And if they're my books, I would underline certain sentences and paragraphs that I find very important. I just love books. And speaking of media and all of that, I have another question for you, which we'll talk about now just before we go on break. So in the 90s, you worked with major consultancies such as McKinsey and Company, delivering systems such as organizational soul intelligence and whole self-management. Would you share the basic model behind these programs? And we'll take a break and we'll talk more about that. But please begin.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, how did I get to all that? Well, see, the spiritual sort of unfolding that happened to me earlier on in New York with the quote unquote Kundalini or things of that nature. I started really getting very deep into because it was like I tried to understand like what's really going on, what's going on under the like under the veil, whatever, or under the surface. And and so one of the things that really hit me very strongly when I was doing research was the model of superconductivity. And that became the premise of the systems that I created. And what I discovered is, what I learned was that in ordinary electrical conductivity, electrons bounce around, collide, they create electrical resistance, like mechanical stress and breakdown. I said, well, are we conducting electricity? Well, we are through our breathing. So what I discovered is that resistance equals stress, stress equals breakdown. So if we can discover where there's resistance and organizational soul intelligence, whole self-management, they all really built on that model, then we could nip stress in the bud. And that's something just to leave somebody before wherever you feel the resistance, because the resistance is going to create that stress, like the mechanical stress, but it creates that internally, and that stress then is going to obviously have an effect on one's physical health. And eventual breakdown. So it's the same model. So it's like, how do we discover where there's resistance in those moments? And how do we work through it energetically? And I believe the breath is the vehicle for that. As we always say, like breathe through it, right? Or breathe into it, as opposed to keeping this sort of resistant state that will eventually start degrading one's physical health.
Stress is so corrosive, really, on all systems. And, breathing, my favorite breath right now is breathe in 4, hold for 4, and then breathe out 8. It's in my cheat sheet for high vibration living. And when I do that, I just feel so relaxed. And you do it in blocks of time, but that allows the parasympathetic nervous system to come in to calm the sympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
Naturally, without drugs, we are creating our own relaxation effect.
We create our own drugs internally.
Yes, yes.
Or a drugstore. Depends upon what you want to take. And that's why drugs are such an issue, I think, in society, because it's like you have these external things that you take that if you want to have more energy or you want to go to sleep or you have depression and anxiety, and it's multi-billion dollar industry. So we can produce our own through our own understanding our own physiology. And you're right, the breath really does work that way. The one thing I just want to say when I discovered that really, and this is something that people could work with, is if you use the figure 8, breathing in and then exhaling, what starts happening is you have this loop. The inner becomes the outer becomes the inner. Like imagine you had a figure 8 and you had an arrow on the top part of the top loop, it would be going from the inside to the outside. When that arrow now, like a conveyor belt, hit that 0 point and the bottom loop, it would be going from the outside to the inside. So in a way, it's like the inner becomes the outer becomes the inner. And you get into that state, and there's a fluid state. And then it's really like retraining the way we conduct energy. And in certain situations, when the resistance is really high, it's that's you could be at a business meeting, nobody even know what you're doing. You're clearing that resistance and getting into a place, a more centered place.
And at a more centered place, I am much more in touch with my creativity. I can be in the moment. I'm not distracted. It's very, very powerful. Now, it is time for us to take a commercial break, Jared, but I'd like to talk more about your models. I think you may have more to say, but also I want to understand what's new for you, what other projects you will be doing when we come back. So listeners, come back for this very informative conversation.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona broadcast. I'm Linda Marcanico with my guest, Jared Rosen. Jared, please unmute yourself. I know it's so tricky. Often I forget. So here you are, unmuted. Would you say more about the model? I don't know whether we've gotten all the information about it.
Yes. Well, I'm going to actually frame it from a different perspective, because organizational soul intelligence that's a whole other conversation, working in leadership and such. And it's all about synergy, collaboration, and there's like this kind of group soul type of experience. And I've worked with pretty major leaders, and they were easy to work with because they understood the need for that sense of collaboration and cohesion and such. Whole self-management was much more oriented towards a personal system of healing, or awareness. But it was all based on what came to me in the early 80s. I actually was with a friend who was the third person in the US to be initiated into Reiki healing system. And she was a friend, and she goes, I'll attune you. And she kept she gave me all 4 degrees of Reiki in one sit-in, which usually is over time. And when we hit the 4th degree of it, I actually saw this symbol, this kind of geometric, and then I started actually downloading, if you can use that term, a system, and it was called Whole Light Fusion, Life Energy System. And that's the basis with the superconductivity model, with the breath. And I did retreats in Australia and the US, and people were trained in that there was kind of an energy healing in a way system, because once the person that's delivering the work, delivering the whole life fusion session, is in that breath as well. And the interesting thing is that figure 8 breath, where the insides becoming the outside or inners becoming the outer, at the center of that figure 8, that point in the very center is, if you look at it this way, it's where everything is flowing out and flowing back in. But that point represents what I would consider the 0 point. And there's such a thing as 0 point physics. And that 0 point really is where there's nothing and everything. And this is an incredible awakening to what we call the universe, to get to that place where there's no matter, there's no movement, it's just being. And so what happened in the healing session when we're working with people is that breath in brought them to that place. They didn't feel like they even had to breathe anymore. And it was a state of fusion into this state of wholeness, into this kind of unified field of of wholeness. So that work I taught for years, and people were trained as life energy trainers, and it moved into the more corporate model and all of that until I ended up in the book world, which I've been in for about 25 years now, book and media.
I'm thinking that Greg Braden, one of my favorite authors, talks about 0 point and compassion, and that when we get to compassion, which I think the state of true compassion is that 0 point, we then move into the higher levels of our DNA. So we use very little of our DNA. So somebody said 10%. I'm not an expert on that, but I certainly do foresee and wish for and aspire to having more access to higher levels of my DNA. So that's very exciting to me.
There's something called microtubules in the DNA, and there's been some scientific research or studies that the microtubules are way can be an antenna. And I mean, this is all, I mean, there's nothing solid in science, and I know that's only peripheral from my knowledge, but we start looking at from that perspective, it really is in a way that I use this to help people that have a lot of fear of death and believe that death is final. Is I say to them, look at your computer, your laptop. You're writing a book on your laptop, okay? And all of a sudden your laptop dies. It's dead. The book that we're writing, is it gone? It's gone in that you can't access it in that computer anymore. But that file can be on another computer anywhere, right? It still exists. The book that hasn't gone away. So in a way, the body is this receiver, and there's been a lot of research now, and it's really getting clear that. And actually, I worked with a medical doctor who was a Harvard Medical School professor on a book. It wasn't, I believe it's not complete, called "The Mind Is Not the Brain," and he really understands that from that perspective. The mind, you know, whether you distinguish what is the mind or the soul, whatever, there's this field that's our true self that has all the knowledge and wisdom. And when we tap into that, we really discover a true self that's going to transcend even our physical death.
Absolutely. I think of the mind as what you just described and more. We could talk more about it. And the brain as the computer. And I think that when we meditate, first I relax, then I get into the higher mind. And then if I'm really centered and grounded, I can see my multidimensional self. I get into the multidimensional self, which then we can see geometric figures, and that's how beings are seen. That's one of the versions of being a spiritual being, is oscillating as a geometric shape. So it's so fascinating. But just quickly before we go, is there anything, what are you doing next? What's your next project?
Oh, well, it's probably the biggest thing ever. I've been doing book development, and I published probably 40, 50 books, and then all the media stuff that we've done over the years. And I always had this vision. I mean, actually, I created something called the M2 M squared ebook. Back earlier on, it was one of the early days before anyone knew what a flip book was, but we had media embedded. So, for instance, we did, like, I've done so many of them, like the one we did with Ervin Laszlo. I mean, you flip the pages, and Deepak Chopra's talking about Ervin Laszlo's work, and there's some text, and it's a distillation of the book. Flip another page, and Marianne Williamson is talking about Ervin Laszlo's work, or Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, and such. And so I was like, how do we integrate the media and such? So for years, I've been creating what you can call like book trailers, which we've done with you as well. But I had this vision, and we're building it now. We actually has an app. It's on our website, DreamSculpt.com, DreamSculpt. You can just look for the app, and it's, more of the prototype. We have it in the 2 app stores, in Apple and Google. But what we're building now, the author experience, is going to aggregate potentially, well, we have access to thousands of small presses, to bring the nonfiction small presses, the indie presses, the hybrid publishers, and their authors to this platform, the cross-platform, the app and web, where they can actually connect with the authors in their own media ecosystem. So like yourself, you have the trailer, but you also have other things, obviously, that you've created, integrated. But the core of what we're doing there is an AI version of the author they call it a digital twin. So if it's used, somebody can actually say, so Linda, you know, where's a good place to eat in Sedona? And it was in the book, or all the content that we ingest into this. It could be people written 10 books and 20 videos. So, as we know with AI, you're going to actually have that dialogue, and it's in its own independent service. So it's not like ChatGPT. So we're building that right now. And that's probably the most exciting thing, because I really could see, at some point, this is a place of learning about anything. Because if they're nonfiction books, then there's potentially thousands of books and thousands of authors. It's a place of learning, and that's been my goal, to create that space where people can learn about anything. And then, of course, go further in buying a book or engaging in the courses and programs.
When do you think the project will be actually live?
Well, if somebody wants to see the sort of prototype of it, they can. Basically, it's DreamSculpt AE. It's in the Apple and the Google store. But if you go to DreamSculpt.com, you'll see that there's a tab there that says AE. But what we're doing in the big picture of this, it requires raising capital. It requires working with technologists. So I can't give an actual date when it will be done. But it's pretty major. I really see that this will it's really important for the small presses. It's really important for the authors that kind of disappeared and have great knowledge and wisdom to share. And it's really great for the readers or the knowledge seekers, because it's different than going to ChatGPT, and it was different than Amazon's just a store. I mean, the books are there. You can see a book description. But this really is a way to learn from the authors in any subject that potentially fits into the platform.
Sounds wonderful.
It's a big job.
Yes. How can and it's encompasses your creative self, your business side, your desire to help authors, and it sounds perfect for me.
Knowledge and wisdom.
Yes, absolutely. How can people say again?
Which was everyone needs wisdom.
Don't we? Don't we? Especially in today's world. How can people find you, Jared?
Well, the easiest way is to go onto our website, DreamSculpt.com. That's the word dream, DREAM, one word, sculpt, SCULPT.com, DreamSculpt.com. And certainly they can reach out. If anyone just wants to personally just reach out to me, I'll give you my personal email. I love to. It's Jared Rosen, JARED, one word, at mac.com. JAREDROSEN at mac.com, MAC.com. And if you have any questions or anything you want to share, I welcome that. And it's such a pleasure to be with you, Linda. And really, congratulations on your show. I know you're choosing really eclectic guests, and so you're adding to the knowledge, the wisdom of the world. So thank you.
That's my hope, Jared. It's been a joy to have you. I haven't seen you in a bit, and to connect with you in this way has been pure joy.
Well,
so see you next time, everyone.
Absolutely.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.